So, John, it's a week before the State of the Union address. You've had a month to work on it. You've got your most beautiful draft of it yet. And Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine. And the speech is coming on Tuesday at 9 p.m. What do you do?
First, you freak out. I have to say, I feel for the speechwriters in a situation like this. We had to do a little bit of rewriting of the State of the Union 1 year when there was the tragic shooting in Tucson, and that was 2 or 3 weeks before the speech. This one is still being rewritten as we speak right now, and so there's a lot of going to be a lot of late night. I wouldn't imagine that anyone's getting a lot of sleep tonight in the White House, either the president or his speechwriters.
But John, also it includes something that I don't think I've seen before, which is there can be news events during the day on Tuesday. There can be a news event that occurs at 8 p.m. on Tuesday night, Washington time, in Ukraine. And then the president goes on at 9 o'clock. So everyone is going to have to stay agile right up until 9 p.m. in a way that has never been necessary before.
Yeah, they could be making edits. They could be putting edits in the prompter as Biden is, driving over to the Capitol. That's how close this can get. But look, I think you write it in a way so that, depending on what events might happen, that they don't change the speech too much. But again, like you said, you have to be nimble right up until the last moment.
So, what if, these speeches are 45 minutes, an hour, thereabouts. If a half hour in, something truly grave that completely changes the nature of where we stand at that moment happens in Ukraine, is there a way to get that message to the president? Would they have talked about it ahead of time? If this happens, or this happens, put it in the prompter in some kind of way that I'll know how to go to it? How do you plan for that?
I don't think you can get that done. I can't imagine Nancy Pelosi or Kamala Harris passing him a note during the speech. I think that you just have to keep going and deliver the speech as is. And then, the White House will just talk about whatever developments happened after the speech. So I think the important part of this speech is I think he needs to frame sort of the global struggle between democracy and autocracy, both abroad, as we're seeing what's taking place in Ukraine right now, and also here at home. And I think that's sort of the connective tissue that brings together the foreign policy part of the speech and the domestic part of the speech that he'll deliver as well.
Now, we know Joe Biden doesn't like to give a partisan-sounding speech in this kind of setting. He'll do partisan speeches, but only in certain kinds of settings. His predecessor called Vladimir Putin a genius last week. Would this president go into that chamber tomorrow night and make any reference to that kind of talk from Donald Trump?
I don't imagine that he'll speak about Donald Trump directly or mention him directly. But look, we remember when he gave an address on the anniversary of January 6th, he didn't need to really go at, he went after Trump, but he did so in a way that also sort of met the moment. And I do think that Joe Biden can reference the challenges we've had here at home defending democracy from autocrats and from autocratic threats. He'll probably, I imagine, reference January 6th again in this speech, especially if he's talking about what the Ukrainians are going through as well. So I don't think that you have to mention Donald Trump directly to make it pretty clear that, the world is under threat from autocrats, whether it's Vladimir Putin in Ukraine right now or what we dealt with when Donald Trump was president.
What does he say to Republican voters who, before the invasion of Ukraine anyway, expressed more admiration for Vladimir Putin than for Joe Biden?
There was some new polling that came out today. There was a YouGov poll and there was a Quinnipiac poll, and it showed that, support for Vladimir Putin, admiration for Vladimir Putin is it's in single digits. And that's even true among Republican voters. So I do think that this sort of this love of Putin, this pro-Putin wing of the Republican Party is largely confined to the right-wing media at this point. Though, of course, you do have a small segment of the electorate the Republican electorate that's still Putin fans here, but I don't think it's quite as big as you would believe from watching the Tucker Carlsons of the world on TV.